This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast brought to you by Prize Picks, coming at you Wednesday morning. It's February 28th after a Wolves win on Tuesday night against the San Antonio Spurs. Final score is Wolves 114, Spurs 105. Wasn't really that close of a game. The Wolves got up by as much as 24 in the third quarter. We got Britt Robson from Min Post here with us today. Britt, the Wolves play again this evening against the Grizzlies. But I think there's still things worth hitting on, specifically from the Spurs game. We can go a little bit bigger picture too, if you'd like. I think we're all looking for things of, at least right now, of this team getting back onto track post All-Star, getting their rhythm, as kind of every team, around the league is doing. No Karl Anthony Towns in that game last night. He missed for personal reasons. And that's always kind of, for me, the theme of any game. Rudy misses the Brooklyn game. How did they play in Rudy's absence there when Ant has missed games? Mike Conley's missed games. We haven't had many Cat missed games. This was his second one, right? He missed I think it was December 23rd against the Kings game, and the Wolves beat the Kings that night in Cat's absence, and they beat the Spurs last night. What stands out to you about how the Wolves played last night when Towns is off the floor?
I just think it's another sign of their depth that is fascinating. I mean, they are the number one defense in the NBA. In February, like, Rudy Gobert is among the bottom four guys in defensive rating. And that's not anything against Rudy. He's still playing great defense. But they're bringing Kyle Anderson, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Naz Reid off the bench. And all three of those guys are really getting after it on defense. You saw it. Defense, it was like the old fly-around days. The
energy, man. Energy. Yep.
They were creating turnovers, and Ant was on the floor. And whenever Ant and Naz are together, and Nickeil has started to pick that up, and then you threw J-Mac in, who's obviously a poacher as well. They took advantage of a very inexperienced Spurs team, and just thrashed them to the point where it was essentially over by the end of the, midway to the end of the second quarter. They were up, almost 20. Spurs have the worst record in the Western Conference. Wolves have the best record in the Western Conference. So that was notable, that the bench, especially the way the defense gets after it from the bench personnel, was noticeable. And it was hard not to notice that the Wolves clowned around. And, you get a guy like Keldon Johnson who, thrives in garbage time. And, it's what happened the last time they played the Spurs, only they lost that game. This team has a tendency to overassume it gets, frankly, complacent and lazy, and mentally in particular starts to relax and enjoy the game in a manner that is not alert. Mm-hmm. And it got to be a 2-possession game within like 3 minutes to go. And that's can be a way to, punt the game. It has happened a handful of times to this team already. This team has been bushwhacked by their own complacency far more often than they've been outplayed by an opponent. Sure. They've very rarely been outplayed this season, but they have played themselves into defeats. And that was, I guess, the other thing I noticed that I would comment on is that they still have a ways to go. And I understand once the playoffs happen, theoretically, they shouldn't get that way. But, if you're up 25 in the middle of the third quarter in a playoff game, I'm not necessarily sure this team is going to step on the neck and keep going. It just doesn't seem to be their character.
Yeah, then yet some of it's understandable too. I mean, that's obviously my first instinct, but then you're like, okay, it's a Spurs. You're playing the Spurs on a back-to-back, and that in and of itself isn't at all concerning to me. That you let them back into the game. It's the element of it that is partially concerning is this is a theme, right? For this team throughout the season is letting their foot off the gas, not stepping on the neck. We've seen them lose games where they just let it go there. It didn't ever really feel like it was getting that close to that. Last night, I mean, Finch still was pretty intentional about, limiting Mike Conley's minutes and all those sort of things, like trying to get out of that game without having to do too much. I think they would have liked to go to the bench guys earlier. I think Rudy played 39 minutes last night. Love that, with it being a back-to-back, but, no Carl. Maybe you have to do that. Yeah, I don't know. We've had the conversation so many times about how this team wanes like that. And as always, it just goes back to Ant. Where's his attentiveness at? Where's his effort level at? How much does he want to, step on teams next? Because when he does,
Right.
What stood out to me, I think I go again when players are missing. I'm kind of looking or when a star is missing, looking for a pairing to kind of step up in that player's stead. And it was obvious last night that the pairing that picked it up was Ant and Naz. Do you know what the best 2-man pairing for the season is for the Wolves right now? It's not Ant and Naz. I'll say that.
No, it might be Nikhil and Naz, or it might be Slow-Mo, and it'll be one of those 3 bench guys, I think, in tandem with each other. It'd be my guess.
So there's some like Nikhil ones that I separated for like plus 500 minutes. I think it was. And Nikhil is in the 5th best one. Him and Gobert is plus 11.6. But the very best lineup combination this season has
Cat
been
and Rudy.
No, Cat isn't in any of the top 6.
Interesting.
It's just like this morning I was going through because I was kind of looking for that.
Right.
Towns or whatever. Rudy and Naz has been the best most effective 2-man pairing in terms of net rating this season, plus 15.8. And the second most effective one has been Ant and Naz. And they're at plus 15, just about at the same level there. And, we were sitting there at the game together last night. And we're like, man, we got to get more of those 2 guys on the floor together. That pairing, right?
Well, and what's fascinating about that is last season, Rudy and Naz were terrible together.
Terrible.
And last
minus
season,
12.1, it was their worst.
And last season, Ant and Naz were fantastic together. So what you had there was 2 great offensive talents who used their gambling and speed and get after it on defense to run and get points in transition and also score in the half court when they needed to. But that gambling and scrambling on defense can burn you. And if you're in the half court with Rudy, you need to be able to play. You need to hold up your end. Rudy will hold up his end and even will probably take a little of your end. But you need to be able to have your act together enough in the half court if you're going to play successfully with Rudy. And that, to me, I asked, Naz this last night. I said, do you think the biggest improvement for you this season has been your ability to guard on the perimeter? He said 100%. And right. I mean, and it's so obvious. Finch is just beside himself. He couldn't get enough of it in the post game.
Yeah.
And that is kind of what I'm talking about. It's like when I was thinking about a Cat, Naz, Slow-Mo front court at the beginning of the season, that was a red flag territory for defense. I just didn't have any idea, because Slow-Mo would be at the 3. He's not a fast person. Naz would be at the 4, kind of unfamiliar territory. And Cat at the 5, we know what that's like.
Too familiar of territory.
Yeah. And so what Naz has done, and it's funny, Brunson in the first question of the pregame with Finch was talking about Slow-Mo's versatility. Well, Slow-Mo plays the same whether he's at the 3 or the 4. It's not really versatile. It's the same position. But Naz, if you put Naz on the floor with Rudy, Naz is like a wing.
Yeah.
And if
not like he just is. I mean, it's just it's not even like ambiguous.
And what that means is you could switch almost everything. At the very least, you can do your 2 through 5 switches, 1 through 4 switches with Naz on the floor without even thinking about it. And you can also do zones. I mean, Naz made a play last night where he chased down somebody on a transition play, a guard racing toward the basket,
Evan Vassell,
and stopped the play.
He was in the far opposite corner. Vassell stole it at the nail, started dribbling up the court, and Naz took the longer angle and beat Vassell to the rim on the other side. Fast. I mean, fast as shit.
This guy is become a bargain, such a bargain at what he's making now. And again, what we saw last night, Cat, and the night before, Rudy out, no problem. I mean, in some respects, it just gives, if you give those guys more minutes together with that blended lineup, you throw a starter or two with those three, that's going to be a really good 5-man lineup. Yep. I mean, almost regardless. And if you Fitch has even gotten, you can tell he's tickled by it. He gets to play 3 point guards every now and then just for shits and giggles, And so it's just this weird. Now, obviously, this isn't, top tier talent on the other side of the ball. And we'll probably see some more of this experimentation tonight against Memphis. But what is really cool about it is that he is getting a look at the broader array of what people could do. And he was reluctant to talk about Naz guarding in space because I think, one, he didn't want to jinx it, and one, he didn't want Naz to, depart from what Naz was doing really well in terms of being a good 4.
Sure. But
Naz can play 3, and Slow-Mo can play 3. Those guys can switch on 3 and 4 on assignments and on roles. And the only thing on offense is that Slow-Mo is a point guard and Naz is a slasher. But it's so much fun. I look forward to the end of the first quarter and much of the second quarter, and then in the third quarter, when the bench comes in, when that trio comes in of Naz and now Monte Morris or whatever as well, as Slow-Mo. Then
that's where the game shifted last night. It was Naz kind of checked in midway through the first quarter. And I put down in my notes that Naz was a plus 17 minutes into the game. Mm-hmm. It was, they got, and we'll talk about Monte Morris later too. It was Reed and Morris both came in together. I think the Wolves were down 13-10 at that point. And then I think it was 29-19 by the end of the first quarter. That kind of the lead extended more in the second quarter. And it was, like you said at the beginning, was the energy of that group that the bench guys bring. And also, I think, how they pair in tandem with Ant. They let Ant get out and play more of a floor game, play with more pace, more in transition. Whereas just, when you're playing with Mike Conley and Rudy Gobert, it's going to be a little bit more of a slowed down half-court type of offense. I think it's good for Finch to be able to feed Ant that, and I think Naz feeds that to him more than anything. You mentioned Finch talking about it a little bit. I'll play that clip. I asked Finch about the Ant and Naz pairing. Ant and Naz together have been one of your more effective 2-man pairings all season, and tonight it seemed like they're getting out in transition a lot together. What do you see from those two that makes it effective when they share the floor?
Well, they're our 2 most dynamic scorers, and they really can score. Defensively, Naz has been outstanding, and just taking a lot of different matchups. So gives us some switching there. I think Naz creates a lot of transition opportunities for us. Gets out, kind of. We don't get a ton of those, but he's usually a catalyst for a lot of them, whether he's pushing or at the end of it. So. And he's just a ball mover. Like, he's got that dynamic quality to him about our offense. So,
big fan. He was a big fan of Naz. It was all the answers last night.
And also, I mean, the attitudinal catalyst. I mean, Ant is 22 years old and wants to hoop. He doesn't want to set up in the half court, swing, make a cut, set a pick.
Yep.
That is what Conley and Gobert regard as like beautiful basketball. That's what Ant regards as work.
Yeah, like homework.
You know,
yeah.
and so when Naz comes on the floor,
Let's
basically theoretically posts up somebody or even like faces up somebody 18 feet from the basket, dribbles the ball between his legs 2 times, dekes one way, goes the other, goes underneath the basket and uses his opposite hand to bank it in. Ant sees that from his big, and tell me that doesn't get Ant off.
No, totally. And I think particularly against Wemby too, that
and fouls.
Yeah, I mean, he and the last time they played San Antonio at home, at least I remember Naz going at him. No. Naz went at Wemby. I remember the Target Center when I don't remember the San
win.
Antonio game where they lost.
Yeah.
The win, Naz played really well against Wemby, and for Ant, that's who you're going at in that matchup. So there's a little more like, okay, that's their best player, on the other team, and my big is defeating him here. He's outrunning him. He's still finishing it. He's beating him. Naz was beating Wemby at times at Naz's game, which was with pace and transition and moving. And then he also beat Wemby at Wemby's game a couple times, finishing at the rim, drawing fouls. Like Naz, everyone out there is, somewhat scared of Wemby at the rim, as they should be.
Right.
But Naz isn't, and that's kind of, I think that's kind of in who Naz is. It gets him in trouble sometimes, right? Like a little bit of
it's a really big meal.
Yeah, that fast food. But yeah, just encouraging, and like I think too with Naz, it's not like he's played great over the last 6 weeks too. So I would say this is just as informative from a standpoint of like getting Naz into this final stretch of the season, and they're trying to achieve is be peaking, particularly offensively, put some more juice into that offense over these last 24, 25 games. And Naz is their best way to do that off the bench. So I think that's what, Finch is excited about as much as anything, because he knows Naz is going to give him more of that offensive juice, but he's excited that Naz is also not costing them defensively. I think that's why you hear Finch affirm that, or you did hear him affirm that over and over in his post-game comments.
And it's blended juice. I mean, last night, Naz was 8 for 10, but only 1 for 2 from 3, which means he was, what does that make? 7 for 8 inside the arc.
Sure.
I mean, against Wemby. Against the San Antonio team that, wants to protect the rim. And so that there are other nights where, and the other thing is the 3 fouls on Wemby, which compromises Wemby's ability to defend at the rim and also gets Naz points at the line. The fact that he's making all but 1 of 8 shots while drawing 3 fouls indicates that he's driving to score. Ant and Cat ought to take notes for a minute. Ant is not trying to draw the foul, and that's one of the ways he doesn't draw he does draw the foul is because his quickness, he's aiming to score, and he's not avoiding contact. It's just that he's trying to get to the rim the way he's trying to get to the rim.
Sure.
And, it's just, I get it that when Naz has an off game, it's because he's missing wide open threes or turning the ball over because I think, to be honest with you, teams have scouted him and think that it's important to stop him. And one of the ways you do stop Naz is gap help, a lot of gap help. Because one of the things that Naz is still a little bit weak in is understanding people poaching from the side.
Yeah, it's very similar to Ant.
Yeah, he is very, very rim conscious, and he's looking straight line. He's not looking peripherally. And let's face it, when Naz is on the roll, he almost never passes. I mean, that's just not his game.
Right. Let me grab our first break here. Today's show is brought to you by our new sponsor, Adriana Lonick. who is a realtor for Coldwell Banker Realty. I've been mentioning it this week. Adriana and I met and just kind of talking about the idea of maybe the overlap of listeners to this show and people who might be wanting to buy or sell a home. Whether you're a first-time home buyer or you've bought and sold many homes, Adriana wants to help make your next move the best experience it can be. And as I've mentioned, we're adding the perk that if you mention this podcast, you will get a free pair of Wolves tickets when you do book a consultation with Adriana. She's a Wolves fan, a season ticket holder, and just reading through some of the reviews of her work, there is a lot of specificity in her game to kind of help with the home buying or selling experience. Again, rather if this is brand new to you or something you've done for a long time. So it's hard to know where to begin with buying a house, and the place to do that is to start by setting up a consultation with a realtor. And if you would like to work with Adriana, which we would recommend, go to thedancingrealtor.com, where you can call or text at 715-304-9920 again to book a consultation. And if you do that, we will get you a pair of free Wolves tickets to a game. Again, her name is Adriana Lonick. She works with Coldwell Banker Realty. You can check out her website, which is up on the screen now, at thedancingrealtor.com, or call/text at 715-304-9920. And then again, just quickly, Prize Picks, another Wolves game tonight. I was kind of looking at it before the game, but they got Jaden McDaniels all the way down to single digits for his point total per game, which kind of makes sense. Jaden's been struggling a little bit, but I was looking at some of that. I'm like, okay, back to back, we got Ant at 27.5, back to back Ant, maybe go less than 27.5. If Carl's back, can he get more than 24.5? That's juice. Get Jaden going there. Obviously, these are just kind of fun things to do while the game is going on. It's a like game specific fantasy basketball. So as always, check out Prize Picks for Wolves game, prizepicks.com, Prize Picks app, promo code Dane for a $100 sign up bonus. All right, Brett. I want to talk about Gobert a little bit from last night. We talked so much about the things we know he does well and has done consistently well this season. I thought what stood out in his game last night, and has been, if you've been watching every game, a bit of a theme this season, is his ability to post up with power and finish. If it is somebody who's weaker than him physically, he has, with some consistency, been able to kind of have that power drop step pump fake into dunk game. He had that twice, two big ones on Wemby, which even if you didn't watch the game, I'm sure people saw highlights of that afterwards. And it wasn't just like, what I take from that is it wasn't just one time like going against his little brother, right, and dunking on him. Rudy's been doing more of that this season, and looking into some of the numbers, it's been more of an effective part of the Wolves offense than we might give it credit to, because we've seen enough of the lefty running hooks that hit off the top of the corner or whatever. But in the aggregate, although a small piece of the Wolves offense, Rudy post-ups have actually been an effective part of this team offensively this season. How do you feel about that? When Rudy is under the basket, he has that deep seal, or they find him in those situations. I know there's this like adjective, like anxiety of, is he going to dribble it off his foot or whatever? But how do you feel about going to that a little bit more often?
Well, I think he's improved what he can improve. He's never going to have good hands, and he's never going to have a good sense of where the basket is. In other words, if Rudy has his back to the basket, he is throwing it up on a memory. He's throwing it up on, I think the rim is right around here. And you
if
can
he's
tell
throwing
that,
it up, if he's throwing it up.
Exactly. So my point is, what he has done, where he has improved, is his footwork. Mm-hmm. And that is incredibly important, because he has no margin of error above his waist when it comes to, getting that turnaround slam. Mm-hmm. And it has to be a slam to some extent. It can, if he's facing up, it isn't even that push shot so much as it's like that just almost like a putback without getting the offensive rebound sometimes.
Right.
And then the other thing is what he did twice to Wemby last night, which is using his footwork. It doesn't have to be tremendous fakes because he's so close to the rim that you have to bite. I mean,
Right.
And I would bite because Rudy is not a finished product down there even now. So that if you're right, that you could, if you're 7'6" like Wemby, go for the first move. Now, as it turns out, what we found at least twice last night is that Rudy has enough in his bag to fake somebody out who is biting hard on his first move. Part of that is that Wemby is not that quick yet. He's still really growing into his body. I mean, it was so weird to see him fall down so many times last night. And I don't think he was faking. I just think he's like basically, it's like us learning how to run on pogo sticks or something, you know? I mean, it's just sometimes you fall over.
Right.
But I do think that Rudy has worked on his footwork. I think that's the right emphasis, whether it's with, Kevin Hansen, spelled Sanson. I like Sen, which is the way I spelled his name in that assistant coach's column. It may have been that, or it may have been Rudy on his own. You mentioned that you saw a lot of that in the World Cup.
I did, because it was all smalls. He's being guarded by 6-7 guys, and that did really stand out to me in World Cup. Is like they were cool with going to that. I mean, exclusively, and for it to be clear, like these are exclusively one-on-one situations. If there's any help there, get off of it, right?
Right.
But if there are a lot of times where teams will just be like, okay, we're cool with our one guy guarding them here. And if Rudy can take advantage of that, that's valuable. And again, particularly thinking about for the postseason and the idea of a team playing small ball against them, no true center, Rudy is going to have to do that, right? It's always been more about, can Rudy punish small ball on offense more than it exposes him on defense? I think this is an important thing. I asked Rudy about it after the game, kind of with that World Cup context. Here's what he said.
Body to create a little space to dunk, just is that your physicality coming into play, or like how do you try to use that?
Yeah, it's just advantage? Me try to just impact the guys. No one likes to get hit, and I realize now that I have the strength to do it. So I just gotta keep doing it consistently. And I really think over the course of the game, it can really impact my teammates too. When I get a strong finish at the rim and dunk over someone, I really think it impacts the team, but I also think he impacts the guy that's guarding me. No one likes to get hit in the chest all night.
Seems like you started that in like World Cup, more of those kind of like power post-ups more so than last season. Was that something you worked on this summer, or just started going to it maybe more?
Just working on my patience, working on my footwork, and also the strength. Just getting stronger and stronger, getting more balanced, and even more explosive. And all those things coming together and be able to have counter. If I, just like I did tonight, like on a spin move, if it's still there, be able to pump fake and then go back to the other side or finish, draw the foul, and it's fun. It's fun. I still gotta be able to do it more consistently, but I really think it's unstoppable and puts a lot of pressure on whoever's guarding me, and also it draws fouls. So if I'm able to get the guy who's guarding me in foul trouble, that's a huge plus for the team.
Britt, I looked it up. 70 post-ups this season for Rudy, and these are marked as post-ups that lead to a shot or a turnover. This doesn't include passes. But you think about it as, I'm posting up, all right, I'm going and I'm taking this shot. 36 players in the league have 70-plus post-ups this season. And, to be fair here, a lot of them have like 200 or 150, a lot more than Rudy does. But 36 have 70-plus. And amongst those 36 players, Gobert is 7th in effectiveness in post-ups this season, 1.114 points per possession. That's ahead of Anthony Davis. That's ahead of Cat. That's ahead of Giannis in post-ups. Jaren Jackson Jr., Siakam, Şengün, Nurkic, Bam, Sabonis, Vucevic. Again, a lot of those guys are doing it more. Cats, for example, here is about double. I think Cats was 158, if I remember correctly. And it's just a small but effective part of the offense. I thought that I went back to the year before and I'm like, this just has to be way better than last season. But I looked it up. Last season, 81 post-up possessions, 41 players had 81 plus post-ups last year, and Gobert was 13th amongst those 41 players.
What's the turnover ratio? Did you chart that?
I mean, I might be in here.
It's usually in the numbers if you have the page.
Yeah,
up.
it's 14.3% here, which of those 36. Yeah, it's relative, or no, it's the 8th highest of the 36. So he is turning it over. It
does seem like a high risk, high reward thing, but at the same time, if I think a commensurate standing on turnovers and efficiency, and let's face it, if you points per play, you just got through saying turnovers are matched into that.
Yeah, it is.
So what we're really talking about is if he doesn't turn the ball over, he's pretty damn good at getting the ball through the rim, you know? And so here's what I worry about, especially after just listening to him. He wants to do it, and he wants to do it a lot. And,
totally fair.
It needs to be like, 2C in the lineup.
Well, if you look at the two, because I went and I clipped these out. They're on Twitter somewhere from me. They're broken possessions. Both of them were.
Oh, okay.
It was like the first one, the big Rudy on Wemby dunk was it was like Monte Morris pick and roll. He did that like gnashing, goes under the rim with it, kicks it to Naz. There's like 7 seconds on the shot clock. Naz gets into like a handoff with Rudy. Rudy immediately, which was big, decisively went at Wemby, one dribble pump, spin back dunk, and then the other one was on the bench in front of us. It was also like 6-7 seconds left. Rudy's kind of in the dunker and he went into a post move with him. They're not, I think that's your point, right?
That's perfect. That is perfect.
I just think it's just worth noting, right? This is always what we fight with Gobert is the aesthetic, right? The aesthetic versus the result. And I think he had another post up on Wemby earlier. Well, like we said, it's like a running left hook and like just like 0% chance, right?
It actually looked like it might have been like a corner 3 pass off the carom, It
was hard. Yeah. But that's just what I think we need to remind ourselves is in the aggregate, this is okay. It doesn't need to be a big part of the diet, but since he's been here, I mean, over a point per possession on those. I mean, like Ant pick and rolls. Granted, he does them a way higher volume. Those aren't a point per possession when he shoots up the pick and roll. Ant ISOs are less than a point per possession. Naz post ups terrible this season. 0.644 points per possession. Awful.
Right.
Like even Cat. I looked at his spot up things, which is not obviously when Cat does a spot up and he shoots it.
Right.
That's well over a point per possession. But in the aggregate, because Cat pumps and goes, and that deteriorates the efficiency of the spot up situations, he's under a point per possession in those two. So it's not like something to just mess around with and do. When the Wolves go to it, it's worked. And again, against I'm thinking about this in the case of a team that's going to play small against them being something that they can go to on occasion. That I think that's big.
It's an ongoing theme this season, and I've written like at least 2 columns about it, maybe 3. I'm probably going to do another one, if not tomorrow, sometime soon. The template for a successful Timberwolves offense could not be more explicit at this point. I mean, it is just dumbfounding to me that Finch preaches it, they game plan it, it's laid out, and this team continues to sabotage its own collective expertise at that end of the floor. They are so inefficient relative to their capability. And what makes this so maddening is that they have a historically great defense and they have phenomenal talent on offense. They really do have the capability to be a championship contender after winning one playoff game the year before. They have a not unrealistic shot of being a force that other teams could play their best game and still lose if the Wolves play their best game.
If they do the template for
If
offensive success. Yeah.
if they utilize the system that has been implemented, move the ball, move without the ball, make quick decisions, emphasize your strengths and matchups, and Gobert being like one of the things, as we said, it's kind of like the fruit cup at the end of the meal, but it finishes the meal, whatever, But the bottom line is this team prefers instead, to like eat 4 helpings of bread, and then start the meal. It's like, it's incredible to me.
That's how dinner works in my family.
Well, as a guy who works on a carbohydrates and caffeine diet, I will also admit that it usually is mine. On the other hand, I don't claim to be in perfect physical condition. And if I was, in a sporting event that caused me to have to go 82 games to do everything just right, I might eat
a couple more fruit cups then.
Exactly. At the very least, some, the vegetables of Mike Conley's high pick and roll, or something. Yeah. But why this team? I mean, Ant went through 2 or 3 games. His assist to turnover ratio was 17-1. You cannot have an assist to turnover ratio of 17-1 unless you have the court vision, you have the discipline, you see how teams are attacking you, and you respond accordingly. Why that can't sustain, and I'm not talking about 17-1 sustain. I'm talking about like 3-1 or 4-1 assist to turnover ratio. If Ant had an assist to turnover ratio of 3-1 and Cat had an assist to turnover ratio of 2-1, and Cat was increasing his 3-point mix and reducing his dribble penetration, this team would really have a chance to beat everybody. And I can't remember, 03-04 is the obvious comparison. That is the only other time I've covered this team where I could honestly say that. And yet, you were, we were together. You saw, for some reason, I was just furious after that Milwaukee game because they beat the Bucks 3 out of 4 quarters and just played so stupidly in that third quarter. They did not get their defense a chance. The Bucks suddenly, the wounded Bucks everybody had been talking about, how it wasn't working. You just give them an infusion of, it was the first game after the All-Star break, and
right.
And you provide sustenance to quality opponents, you're going to probably lose. And not only that, but you're ingraining more of that awful habit that you have. And it's just so obvious that they're capable of doing something else, because when they do, boom. They handily beat the Clippers. Right. They handily beat the Bucks. They beat any team. They play the Celtics. They've actually played really great basketball relative to their talent on the floor. When they played the Celtics, both times they played them.
Sure.
And so what every Wolves fan should hope for is that this team somehow aligns itself when the games really start to matter and play to their potential. And if they play to their potential, some incredible things could happen this year.
Britt, you were excited about the Monte Morris minutes last night, and asked Finch not only about Morris, but the going to the 2-point guard look, which is something this team has done for the last 2 games when they've been down Rudy against Brooklyn, down Cat last night. Jordan McLaughlin is added to the rotation as the 9th man. He's as funny as that sounds, he's been the replacement
The cat, right?
for the centers, which is leading to a lot more of Monte Morris and a lot more of the 2-point guard look. Here's you and Finch talking about it.
Monte Morris seems like one of these guys that's going to be always a lot better than his box score.
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
What he did physically, with screens and just recognizing things tonight, he does a lot of the little things.
Yeah, super smart. Knows how to get to his spots. He knows how to get to his shots. He kind of, you can see when he starts to attack, he has a plan. Really, really, really safe pair of hands out there. But it's great to see him knock down shots too. So,
Are you? You've been down people, but you said having these 9, you're going to have different combinations to give you depth.
Yeah.
You seem really comfortable with relatively small size on the perimeter as long as you have one big in the game. That seems to be working well. Do you think it can sustain to some extent?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, J-Mac's he's played really well for us all season, and he was outstanding tonight in many ways. I thought he was kind of like turned the game at one point, and then I thought when they had a chance to turn it back, he was great at like stemming that tide. Really like we just went with our most experienced guys, and they just happen to be smaller on the perimeter. But yeah, when you have Rudy out there, and Naz has been great rim protection. He's really got got a lot of block shots in the last couple games since coming back from the break. So.
Couldn't get out of there with a little bit more Naz praise in there too.
Naz defense.
Let's talk about Morris specifically there and what that's kind of unlocking. Good game, and we can talk about that game in particular. But what I was noting during it was, with Monte playing more and earlier, Mike Conley played 10 minutes in the first half and 10 minutes in the second half. On the front end of a back-to-back, Mike wants to play in every one of these games. He doesn't want to do the resting on the second night of a back-to-back thing. Yet at the same time, this is your 36-year-old point guard who's critical to your success in the playoffs. You need that. And that was one of the hopes and expectations of Monte Morris mixing in, is that it was going to allow Mike to have games where he doesn't have to play 30 minutes. And that is happening. It's happening in a different sort of way than we expected. I don't know. I think we just sort of thought it was going to be the starter backup sort of thing. I don't know what it is after this game, but I looked into it before the Spurs game, and 36% of Monte Morris's minutes had come alongside Mike Conley. I would assume it's at that or higher now. But I'm just going to let you rave about Monte Morris a little bit, because that's what you did for about 15 straight minutes.
Well, I mean, the first rotation of the game, so many little things he did. One of the reasons the Wolves got Shake Milton was physicality. He's a big dude, 6'5", I think 220, 230 or whatever. And they thought, we're playing bully ball. Let's extend it to the perimeter. Let's get all 5 guys who can do this, crunch people. And that was one of the reasons that they were excited about Shake. And Shake didn't have that. Shake was in so many ways, he was not what was advertised. Mm-hmm. And I just think it was a bad fit. And, no discredit to either side. It was just clearly something that didn't work out. I looked up Monte Morris's weight. It's 183 pounds, which I simply don't believe. I don't believe he's 2 pounds lighter than J-Mac. I mean, I think that he's, and let's say he is. I haven't seen a perimeter player. I haven't seen almost any Wolves player in 10 years that has slyly meted out punishment on people screening him the way Morris was doing last night. I mean, what happens is somebody screens you, and if you barge into that guy at the time at the level when the level is happening, you're going to get called for a foul. If you do it like 2 beats later, you're not going to get the foul because the guy is moving off the pick and starting to move somewhere. And there were a couple of times where Morris just basically let him know he was there. And it was physical basketball. And, it's an old Sam Mitchell. Sam Mitchell used to do this. And
Britt goes to me in the middle of the game and goes, he's really reminded me of Sam Mitchell. I was like, who? I don't even know what that means.
And it's like, it's a journeyman trick that used to be a lot easier to do. Trenton Hassel used to do it too, of just being somebody who reminds you that they're in the game with a couple of chucks. And you know who does it really well? I mean, not actually really well because he's really blatant at it, but gets away with it a lot because he does it well, is Mo Wagner of the Orlando. A guy who just, he barges into people. And Monte Morris, I love the fact that coming in to this, trade that happened, you look, his assist to turnover ratio is incredible. He can stick a three. He runs a pick and roll. It was not.
Haven't seen a lot of that yet.
I did not see Monte Morris as the kind of guy who would be like straightening up, screeners on the perimeter. And that's the kind of thing, it softens people up. Mike Conley is the beneficiary because those guys are a little bit, he takes the starch out of some of these guys. And then you have the situation, there was a ball where, remember that like Ephus pass or whatever, that guy threw a ball, it went way up in the air. Monte Morris knew that he wasn't going to be able to get that because the guy he was guarding was bigger. I can't even remember who it was. Might have been Sochan, but whoever it was, I can think of Ant, Jade McDaniels, Naz. I can think of so many people who would be like treating it like a jump ball. Here we go. And the odds are, because they would be coming into the play as this guy's almost going straight up because he's almost underneath it, it's a foul situation. You might get the ball, and it might be a cool play. But what Monte Morris did was got himself in defensive position right in front of where this guy was going to catch the ball. That's just smart basketball. And then I think it might have been the same play or a possession later, that play where he was using his hands. There's like four guys who were batting it around, and he found the right way to not only secure that ball among two or three other pairs of hands, but to dribble through it, come down the floor, turn down the three or the open two, to dish it for an open three or a slam. I can't remember which one it was now. I tweeted it out. But it was like he had like about a 7-possession run where 4 of those possessions he did something that showed something unique, something that players don't do every day.
Yeah.
And this
is
like
how you used to react to Jared Vanderbilt. Seriously.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and all of these things that you're talking about, if I'm remembering correctly, happened at the end of the first quarter.
Yeah, it was the first rotation.
Monte Morris checked into the game. Wolves are down 13-10. And at that point, for the rest of the quarter, they went on a 19-8 run. And again, that's when Naz came into it. Got him. It wasn't like I think Morris had 1 3, but 2 assists. I'm pretty sure that's what he left the first quarter with. So it was part of a group, but it was, Naz, not always, but when he does kind of inspire inspiration right away in that first shift, he hits that first 3, he makes some sort of big play dunk, whatever. There's something to that. It kind of, I think it gets Ant his second wind. Ant plays the entirety of the first quarter and the entirety of the third quarter. When that bench group comes in, and if they can inspire something, it gets Ant going again to close that quarter well. And Morris being able to bring that in addition to or in place of Naz seems like it could be a weapon. I mean, I'm not like blown away by Monte Morris or something like that. He's Sam
it's
Mitchell,
not,
but like
everything I just said, let's face it, if you think back to everything I just said, how much of that is on the box score? I mean,
true. Yeah.
Somebody in a position after somebody gets us a pass, rattling somebody on a pick, getting a ball in a loose situation. Not really. I mean, I guess it's a steal, but it's. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt what you were saying.
No. I'm not mad. I'm just writing something down right now.
Okay.
No. I think it is what I like about it.
You were saying
is,
you're not really sold. I mean, or not really as enthusiastic as I am, which I understand.
Yeah. No. I
began to realize I was kind of going overboard just because what happened was, when somebody makes a really cool play and you just say, all right, I'm going to watch him for a couple of plays.
Mm-hmm.
And as I watched him, he made like 2 or 3 or 4 plays.
Right.
It's like, whoa.
I don't say that to mean like a dig or anything. I say that to mean like I don't think there's a level beyond that, right?
No, absolutely not.
If it was somebody who was like when Naz and Nikhil started showing signs of this stuff a couple of years ago, it makes you go, because more can grow on top of it.
Right.
Monte Morris needs to do that. That's it. What he can grow more on is getting in better shape, getting his legs under him after, only having played in I think it was 68 minutes with the Pistons before he, he got to the Wolves. The very end of the first quarter ended in a Monte Morris corner 3 that just didn't make it all the way to the rim because his legs were
so tired.
Yeah.
Tired.
But that is something that's going to go away in all likelihood, right? Like that was the 6th minute of his 6-minute stint. Monte Morris is going to be fine playing the 6th minute of his 6th stint in a week or 2 weeks or whatever it is. So I think there is more that he can do, but really it's just doing the thing that you need him to do. Be a guy. I mean, honestly, what matters so much is just that they guard him on the perimeter. It doesn't even matter right now how often I don't even know what his 3-point percentage is right now. It's just like Jordan McLaughlin is now over 40%. But when Jordan McLaughlin plays and he's on the perimeter, they don't guard him.
And they shouldn't.
And so it's one of these things where you have to apply the number into the way in which it's going. And that's not to rip on J-Mac. He played really well in this.
He did.
This 2-point guard look thing as well last night. So be something to track. The numbers with Conley and Morris on the floor together thus far in a small sample size are terrible. I would bet on that more being a small sample size than a ongoing trend. And they're going to let it get its time to prove, to prove that out. It really reminds me of, was that 3 years, Finch's first year when Finch was really into D'Lo and J-Mac, and he would be like, I really like this. And I just would keep looking at the numbers. Everything. They're not good, bud.
Finch
but like
he has a tendency to overrate this stuff. And a lot of it, I mean, I thought Jace was really, really good with J-Mac last night. I don't know if you were in that scrum.
Yeah, no, I was there.
But where he talked about what's it like, to have a multiple point guards on the floor.
Sure.
And, and J-Mac was, and do you watch and see what those guys are doing when you're on the bench? Is another question he asked J-Mac. And they were excellent questions because it is a simple offense to run. You have your reads, you do your reads. And J-Mac was just saying, he does it. I do it. Conley does it. Everybody does it. It's the question then becomes, after the initial reads are there, what do the other guys do? And how can you rescue them sometimes?
Right.
But at the end of the day, I think the most important thing, I was thinking Na and Morris look great together, and they have. I bet they have better numbers. But I think the idea with Conley is being able to get him free for open threes without using Gobert.
That is
really
good,
because the guy still is like almost 45%.
Yeah.
He's one of the top 5 most accurate 3-point shooters in the NBA, and it isn't a fluke. I mean, it's his best season, but it isn't like the last 2 or 3 have been bad.
No, it's that's part of the whole Morris thing too, is it puts Mike Conley in spot up situations rather than pull up situations from 3, while also letting Conley play. I mean, so Conley played 20 minutes last night and actually had like a pretty good line to close the game. Was it 20 minutes, 6 for 10 from the field, 4 of 6 of those were threes that he made, or 4 for 6 from 3, 16 points, and how many of those 19 minutes and 45 seconds was Mike Conley even on ball for?
Right.
So that isn't even a true 20 minutes, that Conley played. So he's going to be fresh to play tonight against Memphis in all likelihood. There's a lot of value in that. And and Moore is providing that. Let's do a final thing to wrap this. Not in the positive vein. I don't know what to call it, so I called it McDaniels writer's block continues. He's just a little stuck. We've talked. I think I talked to this with Chris or Jace earlier in the week, because there's a lot of like animus and laziness stuff about that I saw about McDaniels, after that Brooklyn game, and Finch said, he has to snap out of it. But to me, I don't see it to be an effort thing. I see, even in these bad games, I see huge effort plays from McDaniels all the time. I'm not denying the fact that he's been more ineffective, and he gets in foul trouble again last night, and he gets, really frustrated by that. I just, my pushback is on the idea that it's like deteriorating effort from McDaniels, but I can't argue the fact that he just hasn't been very impactful this season, particularly because they do have Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who can come in for him and play a similar, if not sometimes better, perimeter defense than Jaden does there. This just has to. Jaden needs to find a way to break through this wall. The team needs to do things to break him through that wall. Where are you just sort of at with Jaden McDaniels?
My take on it is that he has set the bar too high for himself this season.
Okay.
I think it's very similar to what Josh Minot is going through, in a very weird, symmetry there. Josh Minot thought that his role on this team would be a lot bigger than it is, and he's dog bite. You can just tell by the way he plays. He wants to make highlights when he's on the court, and that's more understandable than Jaden. Jaden is meant to be the low-key regulator. He's not meant to be the spangled guy, the guy that, okay, look at what Jaden just did.
Sure.
Jaden wants a little bit of both. He isn't theoretically greedy about the fact that he understands points will have to come to him via the effort of others, except he's less patient with it this year than any other season by far.
Right.
He wants to get his taste in the offense, and he is a bad judge of when those tastes should happen.
Mm-hmm.
He is emulating Cat in his 1-on-3 dribble drives to the rim sometimes. His trademark drive to the rim and then bend over backwards. I call it the recliner fadeaway or whatever.
Yeah.
And some of those other things. What Jaden needs to do is let the offense come to him in the form of corner threes. Be ready and prioritize that as your offense. And then after you've hit a couple, up fake, put it on the deck, and get into your spots.
But we're 58 games in. That's not working.
And that is what he has done. It isn't like he doesn't have experience with this, because that's what he did for 2 years.
I'm not saying that's not the right role.
No, I mean,
I'm saying that role is not working.
I've got to think that Finch and everybody who works with Jaden is telling him, I mean, you have to call it be patient in a certain way. All I can say is what we have seen from Jaden McDaniels that we hoped would go away is that he has an uncontrollable temper in very, very short bursts. It isn't like he has an uncontrollable temper. He's not Lance Stevenson or something. He's not somebody who's just like off the chain all the time. It's like 1 minute he's fine, and the next minute he's like twirling Klay Thompson's jersey, or 1 minute he's fine, and the next minute he's committing a foul because he doesn't want the guy to beat him, even though there's 0.4 of a second on the clock in a one-possession game. He has this willful temper that gets the better of him. And I think that builds up because his bar, he really thinks that he should be getting a reliable 12 to 15 points a game, whether or not the offense is steering that.
Well, so that's what I'm saying, is that's clearly where he's at in his head.
Right.
And that has not changed at any point this season. and they have not changed his role at any point this season.
Well, it's because he's so valuable on defense.
I know. I'm asking, and I don't know what the answer is here, but I think what I would lean to personally is scripting more action for Jaden.
Ooh.
Even I think it
I
needs
know,
to
but
change,
that's
man.
feeding the beast.
I don't know. I don't think it necessarily is. I think there's a way in which early in a game, particularly in the first quarter, where you can script a little bit more for Jaden. You know, what is the main thing that, you know, it's just like a random possession,
Right.
and they want to get into something that's that get action with Gobert
Right.
and Ant, or Gobert and Conley. I think Ant and Conley would be better at that action than Jaden would, but that's just a pretty simple one where it's like, okay, here you go, Rudy, create you an advantage, go to the middle of the floor. I believe you run that in the first quarter once or twice and you get Jaden something there. I think you benefit from the advantage of that for the rest of the game. And I'm just at the point, and it's not a guarantee, I don't know, but I'm thinking about this team through the lens of a ceiling here. And
Right.
and your ceiling is lower if this is Jaden. It is. I would be looking, particularly during the regular season, particularly tonight when you're playing freaking Memphis, like let's try it. What has been a game where they've directed that at Jaden ever the whole season?
This is during the course of your answer, while I've been thinking about this, it's really helped my thinking in this response. The two things I thought of is, hey, let's not set up plays for shots for Jaden. Let's use him as a cutter. Let's set up plays where he's cutting, because he's the fifth option. If he's the cutter, you know, guys are not going to use it. And then my second thought was, Rudy is in the dunker spot this year, and that is killing McDaniels' cuts.
Yeah.
And that is one of the reasons he might be frustrated, in terms of he has this high bar for himself.
It's kind of like Shake Milton.
Yeah.
I think the reason that Jalen Noel wildly underwhelmed last season and why Shake Milton wildly underwhelmed this season is because Rudy Gobert is there on offense in their way. And they are the type of offensive player that can beat one guy, they can't beat two. They can't beat the first one and navigate the second guy Rudy's guy at the rim. And that's why, you know,
but the other thing is they cut both Shake and Jalen Noel do a lot of angle cutting and right up the gut cutting. McDaniels is best on baseline cuts, and that's where a guy in the dunker spot is really going to kill you, because there's literally no room. The people can't take the cut seriously to begin with. You're running, you're killing spacing, and you're putting two guys on the baseline so nobody can get back on defense. It is just a terrible. You can't, unless he's on the weak side, and you've done some wonderful, you know, gymnastics with people who typically don't like to do the gymnastics, like Ant and Cat. You are not going to get that open lane on the weak side, and so I mean, I don't know if this is accurate. I'm thinking out loud here.
No, I'm just thinking of, I think what our ideas colliding together are saying is, when McDaniels is on the floor, if it's important to you to get him more, which they might just be at the thing of like, no, it's not. This is the role, whatever.
Right.
But if you want to get him more, it's putting Gobert in the slot where he's played some too. That's where he gets into that action with Conley or Ant often, or sometimes he just plays out of there.
And you could even screen the cutter. I mean, screen the man who's
Flair, whatever.
Theoretically, Jaden is being guarded by.
It's the starting spot for Gobert, in which when Gobert is here, does it allow Jaden to be a weaponized cutter? Because it does in the slot, it doesn't in the dunker.
That's exactly right. So that would be a way to synchronize what you want to see happen and what I think needs to happen, because I think running like pick and rolls or spot ups or whatever for Jaden is only going to increase the guy. He's probably one of those guys, you know, he's never made $25 million in a year. And, you know, I mean, he's got to be thinking, especially when he commits fouls and is off the floor for a while. I just think the way he started on offense was being a corner three outlet shooter. He's become very adept at that.
Right.
And that is a good foundation building block, but that requires patience from Jaden McDaniels. And that's where I think that's why he's not been as effective. I don't think he's impatient with his role on offense as much as he has been in the previous years. And if you're going to expand that role, what's Finch been talking about in terms of making this offense work? And what is the way this offense will work more is to develop more cutting. And if you remember what Cat and Jaden had in terms of when Cat was in the high pick, well, even in the slot pick and roll or, on the elbow, he would find McDaniel's strong side or weak side on cuts.
Finch referenced that pregame yesterday because he got a couple of McDaniels questions too. He's like, when Cat is involving him here to Jaden, he was at Cat and Ant, but he kind of focused on Cat a little bit more
because Cat really likes to do that.
Yeah,
Cat loves to feed layups. And so if Ant feeds a layup, Ant says, "Okay, well, I've done my duty. I'm shooting the next time."
Yeah, that's true.
And Cat's going, "All right, man. I'm a complete player."
I just think it's an interesting overall philosophy sort of thing, right? And what Finch normally sticks to is I believe we're aiming for the best thing here, and we are going to be patient and let that evolve to come to be, right? That's like the whole kind of process.
But we don't know what he's saying behind the scenes because he sees what we see, which is
I'm just saying it's been the same. A lot of McDaniels the same, the way he's been used and the way his effectiveness has been. And yes, there's been the good examples of when Ant and Cat are moving it, that it's working. Maybe I'm just a more impatient person and see and find the need to have Jaden McDaniels playing at if we go into the playoffs and go, Jaden McDaniels and Nickeil Alexander-Walker are about the same thing. That sounds great. What you actually need is Nickeil to be at that level and Jaden to be above it. And that is not just defensively. That's the whole game together. So when we're talking about, these final 24 games, little things that they can do to add to it and be peaking at the right time. Yeah. If Jaden McDaniels has a 10-game run here where it is that 12 to 15 points a night and you feel it, resonating on the defensive end as well. I think that gets me, more encouraged about this team, but he's for sure in a slump right now and hope, just needs to, I don't know. He needs to break out of it or they need to break out.
And the way he's in a slump is that he is not availing himself of the chances to be an efficient scorer. Yeah, he almost never gets shots. And part of that is I don't think that the offense is so sabotaging him that he can't adjust and begin to create things for himself. So it is on him to some extent. It also is a tough role. And also, I just got to think that, let's face it, there's been a lot of dings on his resume since that, breaking his hand thing.
Yeah, the ding of the wall. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it is that he's got a fat contract for a long time. So it isn't like he shouldn't understand that this franchise has backed up their faith in him. Now it's on him to accept the limitations that have been put on him and to get the most out of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that happens from time to time, not at the frequency you'd like to see, but it's not like it's never happened. And, to that end, that it's encouraging and it's just something to track over these.
Well, look at what Rudy has done. Look at what Mike Conley has done. These are old vets who just want to win. They have, what Mike Conley was doing in Utah before he came here is night and day from what he does now. Yeah. What Rudy Gobert was doing in Utah compared to what he's doing now, totally different.
In terms of offensive role, for sure.
Yeah, these guys have understood what they have to do in order to make the team overall better, and they have done it.
But it's also common that that a 31 and 36-year-old would do that, and a 23-year-old wouldn't, or wouldn't come to it as much. And we're all, and I know people are sitting there like, well, it's what you have to do, and it's what we're saying you have to do. But at the same time, this is a 23-year-old human. It's the same reason Ant is continually making turnovers. It's the same reason this team, as Finch says, immaturity shows up in a bunch of different ways. And when this team does have the occasional fall apart, it normally goes back to, the younger players finding immaturity in different ways. And that's just going to come with your 23-year-old sometimes.
A 23-year-old who is very, very quiet and has an explosive temper.
Yes, that's true. All right, we got another game tonight. The plan for tomorrow is I'm just going to do a little 15-minute maybe solo recap of just some main themes of the Grizzlies game, and then I'm going to have Brendan Nunez on, who covers the Kings. The Wolves play the Kings on Friday. Less so a preview of that Kings matchup on Friday, and more so the idea of what that could look like in a playoff series. I've been watching a lot of the Kings recently because I felt like I hadn't, and I think that might very well could be a first round matchup. So Brendan and I'm excited for that. We'll talk about that tomorrow in the Grizzlies game. But Britt, I will see you tonight, and I appreciate you doing this with me today.
Sure, no problem.
All right. Until what will that be? That'll be Thursday morning when I come back, talk a little Grizzlies and Kings. He's Britt. I'm Dane. Another Wolves game tonight. Until then, peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hard so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.